Hello everyone. Today, I, Kheren Timbang, and my friend Intan Adelia will explain about our infographic about moral and philosophical approach in the story of an hour. Moral and philosophical approach views literature not just as a work, but also as a medium that teaches us moral lessons, raises ethical questions, and encourages readers to think about life, values, and human behavior. When we use this approach, we look at a text to understand what is right and what is wrong, what choices that characters make, and how those choices reflect larger ideas about society, freedom, happiness, and responsibility. Plato was one of the earliest figures to develop the moral philosophical approach to literature. He believed that literary work should not only entertain but also teach moral values and guide readers towards righteousness. According to Plato, literature strongly influences the human soul, so every action in a story, no matter how small, should carry moral meaning and life insight.
Next, I will explain the timeline of moral and philosophical approach. It began from 400 BCE to 100 CE. Literature was seen as a tool to teach morality and shape character. Thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, and Horace believed that stories should not only entertain but also teach people how to live a good life. Then, from 500 to 1700, during the medieval and early humanist period, literature spread religious and human values. Stories were used to teach faith, virtue, and moral behavior. And then, from 1700 to 1900, literature became a tool for moral and social reform. Writers use stories to criticize justice and encourage people to become more ethical and responsible. And then from 1900 to the present, the focus has shifted to freedom, human rights, and individual identity. Literature now often talks about personal happiness, gender equality, and human dignity, like in the short story, The Story of an Hour. Next, I will explain about moral values and philosophical ideas. In this approach, moral values and philosophical ideas are closely connected. Moral values guide how people should behave, while philosophical ideas help people think about the meaning of life. First is the honesty is not only about telling the truth to others, but also about being honest with yourself. This kind of honesty often requires bravery because people are usually afraid of being judged. Then, responsibility. It means understanding that every choice has a result. When someone makes a decision, they must be ready to accept the consequences, whether the outcome is good or bad. This teaches people to think carefully before acting. Then sacrifice shows how someone is willing to give up personal desire for the benefit of others. Courage is the strength to face reality even when it is painful. It is not only physical bravery but also emotional strength, such as the courage to accept the truth, changes, or loss. At the same time, this approach raises philosophical questions about life. People are asked to think about what true happiness really is, whether freedom is more important than security, what makes life meaningful, and whether personal happiness should be chosen over social duty. These questions do not have one correct answer, but they invite deep reflection. Then, the impacts on readers. The moral and philosophical approach helps readers see the inner conflicts of the characters, not just their actions. Readers learn that life is often full of difficult choices where there is no perfect solution. This approach also helps readers become more aware of their own values and attitudes. When readers see characters struggling with choices, they begin to reflect on what they would do in a similar situations. Readers also understand that every action has an impact not only on the individual but also on society. A small decision can lead to big consequences. Most importantly, this approach allows readers to understand human emotions more deeply, such as fear, hope, love, suffering, and happiness. It makes stories feel more real and relatable.
Now, what is the purpose to do moral and philosophical analysis in the story of An Hour by Kate Chopin? The first one, to suggest that long-term emotional repression can destroy a person from the inside. In the story, Mrs. Mallard lives under emotional pressure due to marriage, hiding her true feelings until it affects her mental state and her health. The second one, to criticize society's expectation of women. Women in the 19th century are expected to be obedient, loyal, and dependent on their husband for happiness and for their husband's desire. The third one, to show the conflict between individual desires and social norms. Mrs. Mallard's desire for freedom clashes with the social expectation that forced her as a wife that should be obedient to her husband.
Then, the moral values in the short story, The Story of an Hour. In the short story, honesty towards one's own feelings becomes a central theme. Mrs. Mallard realizes that she feels relief instead of only sadness when she hears about her husband's death. This moment shows her true emotional state, which she has never been able to express before. The story also shows awareness of the right to personal freedom. Mrs. Mallard secretly dreams of living for herself. This reflects the idea that women, like men, deserve independence and control over their own lives, not just life as someone's wife. Another important message is the danger of suppressing emotions for too long. For years, Mrs. Mallard hides her true feelings and lives according to social expectations. This emotional pressure weakens her both mentally and physically, and in the end, it contributes to her death. The story warns that ignoring emotions can be harmful.
Now, how the characters in the short story The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin suffer between morals and feelings. Louise, or Mrs. Mallard, suffers because her true desires conflict with the social expectation placed upon her. According to one, in 2009, she experiences an inner awakening and longs for freedom, shown when she shouts the word free, free, free. But this desire clashes with her moral obligation to mourn and devote herself to her husband. At the same time, according to Massiero in 2024, in the article Perspectival Strategies, her suffering is worsening by the expectation of marriage, expressed in "There will be no powerful will bending hers," in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. This sentence shows how 19th century moral norms forced her to suppress her true emotion, making the conflict between desire and duty as the core of her inner suffering. What is Kate Chopin's messages and criticism that portrays in the story? 1. In 2009, explains that Chopin emphasizes that personal freedom is the highest moral value, shown when Louise, or Mrs. Mallard, experiences illumination and imagines a future that belongs to her. As stated, there would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. And reinforced by her cry, free, free, free. However, Chopin also criticizes 19th century culture that suppressed female individuality, especially through marriage, as reflected in the sentence, "There would be no powerful will bending hers," in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. In conclusion, moral and philosophical analysis and personal reflection come together to deepen our understanding of the story of an hour by Kate Chopin. Through the exploration of freedom, oppression, and emotional truth, the story invites us to reflect on what it means to live authentically and truthfully. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for watching and see you next time.